Hello everyone, welcome back to the podcast. So today we're very happy to have Ms. Katalina Toth. So our early decision admit to Harvard University as well as the president of MariMun for the past year. Yes. So hello Katalina, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
We're doing well, thank you. So let's jump right into it. So students I'm sure they're very interested in your story, like for all university things related. So first question is actually, so from the Be MariMun website, when you first got enrolled at Mary, your university plan was already stated Harvard University. So did you always wanted to go to Harvard or to the States to study, or was it mere happenstance?
Harvard was not my original plan. So my plan from the beginning, I thought I would likely apply to McGill Law, and if I got in, then I would go there. But when Harvard actually announced that it was going to go test optional because of COVID, I decided to give it a shot because, well, something important to know about me is that while I love essays, I love writing and language, math is not my forte. So studying for like math components of the SAT and everything, the fact that I would be able to avoid doing that and kind of get in solely based on kind of my strength was appealing to me. So that's when I decided that I would apply to Harvard, but it was definitely not some calculated plan that I had from the beginning.
Okay, then I will leave it to Yana to ask the next questions.
So, you mentioned you applied to Harvard. Did you apply to any other schools?
So since I applied to Harvard early decision, I found out that I got in before most other applications were actually due. But I did apply to Oxford as well. I applied to Oxford in art history because the application was due around the same time as Harvard early decision. And I got an interview, but I actually didn't get in. So, my Oxford interview, I think in the US, interviews for universities tend to they ask you about yourself, they try to figure out about your personality and your kind of extracurricular activities, who you are as a person and your strengths. And for Oxford, it's very much about the subject. So they try to see how much you already know about the subject you're applying for. And they asked me about a painting that was about the South Bank in London, and I just didn't really know anything about that topic. So I didn't get in, but just for people who are applying to universities in the US and the UK, I think it's important to know that the type of interview that you're going to have is very different, and the preparation required is very different as well.
And for US, why did you choose Harvard for early decision when there were a lot of other schools?
Yeah, I think Harvard was just, I had watched a few videos kind of talking about Harvard opportunities and different kind of activities that were going on there, and there was something so appealing about this environment where I felt like there were so many people who had so many like diverse kind of quirky interests that felt like a place that I wanted to be. And I'm sure that that's the case for many other schools, but there was something about Harvard and the actual student body that really appealed to me. And then I actually got on a call with Guillaume Bouchard, who graduated from MariMun a couple years ago and is at Harvard, and he told me a little bit about the environment and about his experience there, and that kind of sealed the deal for me that that's where I wanted to go.
Okay, and how did you go about the process of researching schools? You mentioned that you had a call, but for other schools, did you just look at the website, or how did you go about that?
Yeah, so I would say that I actually, in terms of research, once I had that conversation with Guillaume, I didn't really research much about other schools. I kind of had my sights set and then did all my researching about Harvard. But in terms of kind of finding out about what the options might be, I looked at websites, obviously. I also tried to read on Reddit people's experiences. But I don't know, honestly, I don't think I would have left Canada for any other university. Just because of the cost also, you really have to consider what's going to be best in the long run.
So did you attend any webinars or anything like that?
No, I didn't.
Well, I guess you had a personal webinar with
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I found out a lot from Guillaume. I also talked a lot to our admissions and advisors at MariMun, and they were super helpful. They know basically everything that you would hear in a webinar about any of these kind of bigger schools that a lot of people might want to apply to. And they were incredibly really helpful. So I definitely, like, if anyone is considering going to U.S. university, or if you're going to university at all, talking to the academic advisors in Marianopolis, they're pros.
And was there a reason why you wanted to go outside of Canada? Was it only for the school, or are there any other factors?
No, I mean, I originally leaving Canada, leaving Quebec was kind of the one deterrent for me from, like, once I got into Harvard, I was trying to figure out whether I was going to accept, like, their offer of admission. And it was difficult because I know, like, McGill is a great university. There's so many great universities in Quebec that are, so much cheaper. You get a great education that would allow me also to keep my cost of living down, staying in Montreal, and kind of stay in the environment where I'm comfortable. But I think leaving Canada and getting the experience of Boston, especially in a group of people who are very international, they accept people from everywhere, and something about that made me think that it was kind of unique. I mean, just that the experience, while I would get a great university experience in Montreal, there was something about leaving to go to Harvard that might, help build character or experience in a way that I might not get by staying here where I'm comfortable. But at the same time, I know that that's not the case for everyone, and I definitely think that just going to a U.S. school purely for the sake of going to the U.S. is probably not worth it. There has to be some other driving factor, I think, to justify all of the kind of difficulty there.
And can you tell us more about your intended major at Harvard and why you chose it?
Yeah, so actually I don't have to declare my major until sophomore year, but right now I'm thinking that I'll probably do a double major in history and literature and government, and then I might do a minor in French as well. But basically, I really love writing. I'm in liberal arts, and I really enjoy history, philosophy, everything kind of in that region. And I want to continue doing that as much as possible, and the history and literature major seemed like it would make that basically continue my liberal arts education. And then for government, I'm involved with Model UN. I have written about public policy, and that's also something that really fascinates me and that I'd like to continue to be involved in. So yeah, I'm hoping to learn more about that. And not only get an American perspective, but also an international perspective, and kind of see, I've been in this sort of bubble, I think, of what people's opinions tend to be at Marianopolis and in Montreal, and I don't know, I'm looking forward to seeing how that branches out.
And I guess I will take it from here. And my question is actually regarding when you're researching Harvard, or even Oxford when you are applying to Oxford as well. So, how did you use the information that you gathered in your application?
Oh God, I did a lot of this. So I'll start with Harvard, then I'll talk about Oxford. For Harvard, a lot of what I found in terms of reading what people were saying on Reddit and reading kind of statements and articles that have been published where they interview admissions officers was basically that they want to find people who have certain personality traits. So how does what you have done demonstrate something about your character? And part of that they seemed to talk about was that, classes at Harvard, the environment at Harvard is difficult, so the ability to kind of overcome challenges and persevere, because I think a lot of people who apply to these top schools maybe are kind of used to being good at what they choose to do, or kind of, and understanding that when you go to Harvard, you're probably not going to be, the best anymore. And also there was something else in addition to that, which was basically just kind of quirkiness. Because there are so many applicants who kind of follow similar trajectories, having this kind of aspect of your personality that makes people go, oh wow, that's so cool and interesting and different. And so I think, the value of quirkiness is underestimated in university admissions. And so in my essays, I wrote a little bit about how, in my personal essay, I wrote about how I had overcome previous obstacles, basically from I started ballet pretty late, and talking about how I went from being the worst to kind of getting this, the main role in the end. And I talked about going to a French school, being completely Anglophone, and then having to learn French and get better at that school. So these experiences in my life, starting out being the worst and then kind of improving. And then I also talked about, in my senior year of high school, I did a fashion show where I bought all these used tablecloths and curtains, etc. And I sewed 27 ball gowns, and I did a fashion show. So that was something about me that I think at the time, I wasn't at all doing it for university admissions, but in hindsight, I think that it was like a quirky thing that might make me stand out, because I doubt that we saw a lot of that, and I was able to like submit pictures and everything. So I think probably I hit the quirkiness and the overcoming obstacles without intending to. But I think those were two of the main elements probably. And then for Oxford, just knowing that they were going to ask me a lot about the subject itself, I watched I don't know how many documentaries, I read papers, clearly not enough, but I tried to prepare for the subject itself, which is difficult to do, because it's a wide-ranging subject, but that's basically it.
Okay, I see. And just a question about how you went about the process of gathering information. So websites, students, Reddit, was that it, or were there some other secret sources that you used?
Secret sources. I can't say I really had any secret sources. I had Google at my disposal, and so I looked up previous people's paths, like tried to find people who had uploaded pictures of like their admissions files, which I found like 2, but I don't know. I think it's hard. I don't think people should do that. That's the thing. I did it because I couldn't help it, and I wanted to know after submitting my application what my chances were. But I think in general, they want people who are kind of different. So I don't know how helpful it really is to read other people's applications. Like, if you're doing things that you think are cool and you're doing very well at and kind of setting yourself apart and actually following your own interests, I think that that's more valuable than like writing yourself a to-do list at the beginning of Sec 3 of all things you have to accomplish in the next 5 years. Like, I don't know. I mean, research if you must, and I definitely did because it's hard not to, but yeah.
Okay, then coming back to more school-related things besides research. So you talked about you're in liberal arts, and so how do you think your program in MARI contributed to your application process at Harvard or Oxford?
Oh my gosh, yeah, liberal arts contributed. I mean, I don't know about me, to be totally honest, because the admissions process, regardless of whether you're kind of a pointy person in like STEM fields or language, you have to write essays to get in. And I think for Harvard, actually, the year that I applied, which was this year, I wrote 6 different essays, and one of them had no word limit. So I wrote like 2,000 words, I think, for that one essay, but the other ones were probably around 500. But like just writing that much, liberal arts, we were writing like probably 15 papers a semester, at least. So I think I definitely really learned to write. Like, totally crediting to liberal arts professors. And I think it definitely helped me because even if I was writing about my experience, let's say science or math, I think the quality of writing still has an impact. So if you're someone who can kind of express your interests well or knows how to structure an essay, it definitely is an asset in the applications process, which is kind of unfair, honestly. Like if you're someone who's trying to get in just for math and like, yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily a fair process, but I think being in a program that allowed me to do a lot of reading and writing is definitely helpful.
Okay, I see. And I will touch a bit about your extracurriculars here, but I will leave the main portion of that to Yana. So did you complete any certificates to show your interest while at MARI?
No, I didn't complete any certificates. I did a lot of extracurricular activities and like outside of school activities, but never completed a certificate.
Okay. Then I'll leave it to Yana to talk about your high school and your extracurriculars.
Okay, so if we start with your high school, what was the name of the high school that you attended?
I went to Sacred Heart, which is a smallish girls' school in Montreal.
And can you tell about your extracurricular activities both in high school and CEGEP?
Mm-hmm. So Model UN has been a constant through high school and CEGEP. I think I started Model UN in Sec 3. And yeah, I think that was one of my really main things. I did a lot of Model UN in high school. I went to conferences and competed, and then at Marianopolis, in my first year, I helped organize the conference, and then was first year exec, and then got to be an exec in the second year. And I think that, honestly, Model UN at Marianopolis was a defining element of my experience. It was very time-consuming, and like I think it probably accounted for like 2 courses with like work outside of school. But I loved it, and honestly, I think like I couldn't have chosen a better activity. If there's anyone else who's like me and kind of really likes public speaking and writing, and especially researching public policy, like it united all 3 of those interests for me. And yeah, I just loved it. Other than that, I've done a lot of research. So in high school, I did a competition called Untitled Chapter, which is kind of a public speaking contest for girls' schools in Montreal. And it involved writing a paper, and following that, I spent, also this was very time consuming. People underestimate how time consuming it is. But I worked on that and ended up working with some people at the school and published that. And then I continued doing research outside at McGill while at Marianopolis. Oh, I did the Prix Littéraire, which is like a jury for Quebec books at Marianopolis. Basically, like all CJETs can contribute a jury. Yeah, basically select a book debating for a prize. And I mean, in high school, I did basically everything. I did like literary magazine. I was the editor-in-chief. I did yearbook. I did tons of different things. But I think Model UN, literary magazine, research, probably the 3 largest, most time-consuming ones. Yeah.
And to go back to the research part, how did you find the opportunities for researching at school, but also outside of school?
Yeah, so in high school, Untitled Chapter, so the competition that originally launched writing that paper, they asked the school to select 3 students who would participate, and I just happened to be one of the ones who was selected, which was very lucky. And kind of after we submitted the essay for that, I think I had done so much research that it felt almost like it would be a waste to not try to publish something. And so I started writing the paper, and I think at this point, there is like, I'll just get crazy luck. Like, one of my parents, basically, she's a neuroscientist, but had experience, obviously, publishing. So she was able to help me write that up and kind of tell me how it works, like writing to journals and everything, and kind of getting people's attention. And even though it wasn't her area at all that I was writing, just having someone who had experience publishing research, super helpful. And yeah, after that at Marianopolis, working in McGill, it was just because one of my friend's dads had a lab and was doing cool research. But yeah, basically it was connections, which I know is like a really sucky thing to hear because it's so unfair. But honestly, if you're a student at Marianopolis, you probably know someone who has a parent who has a lab. So I think trying to make those connections, sending off dozens of emails to people at McGill, just asking if they need help, and saying that you're a student at Marianopolis, you might get someone who bites eventually.
And can you tell us a bit more about like your role in that process and what it was about?
Like in research? Okay, so the research that I published originally, I was first author, so I basically wrote the whole thing and then sent it for publication, got peer reviewers' comments, edited like 3 rounds, and got it published. And then in Marianopolis, basically, I was working with a couple of grad students in this person's lab, and basically just doing research on how COVID, pandemic, and quarantine had affected like motivation in Gen Zers. So yeah, it was very interesting research. I never ended up actually publishing anything in that lab. They're still working on it, but yeah, it was really interesting stuff. Taught me a lot about kind of scientific research as opposed to the social scientific research that I had done previously. Yeah.
And did you have any involvements outside of school, for example, for volunteering or work?
Yeah, I did not work at all during my time in Marianopolis. I was really lucky that I didn't have to, but in terms of volunteering, I volunteered at an old folks home that's near my house, and also my grandparents. Currently, we live with them right across the street, so I also took up a lot of my time caring for them. But I think, yeah, that's actually something that I wrote about in some essays that I've submitted various places, is like reform to elder care in Quebec, because it's just honestly like the state of our system is terrible. So kind of volunteering in that area helped me see that and understand that, and ended up being something that I spoke about in my in my university interview, because it's something that's close to me. But I think doing volunteering in an area that you actually maybe want to affect change in further down the line, really helpful. Kind of good.
How do you manage your extracurriculars with schoolwork? Do you have any tips for time management?
Oh God, I'd love to tell you that I manage my time perfectly, and I'm just one of those people who does that, but I'm not. Actually, my Harvard essays I wrote the day before they were. So I'm not very, basically everything I did at Marianopolis, I did the day before it's due. Like my 5,000 word essays. I mean, honestly, but that's the thing. I feel like I do my best work when I'm like under pressure. So don't follow my example. I am an organized person in the sense that I always know what I have coming up and like what will have to be done. Like I never forget things, but I don't like spend 2 weeks working systematically on an essay. I just like sit down with my coffee and like do it and then collapse. So that's my system. Don't do that. It's what works for me.
And while you're doing that as a system, so did you just sort of insert the time for extracurriculars while you're waiting for the due date of your essay?
Yeah, I think extracurriculars, I just kind of do everything when it has to be done. So for extracurriculars for Model UN, for example, I'll always have like at least 3 little deadlines a week of just random things that I need to get done. So I keep a to-do list on my phone, like a checklist that I constantly add to. And whenever like something small just like pops into my head of like, oh, I have to do that, I write it down. And then whenever I have like either I've been writing an essay for 5 hours and just can't anymore, or I have like a little break between classes, I just look at the to-do list and see what I can get done in my little break of time and then get it done. And I think, honestly, having all that stuff written down is really useful. Like, if I was just sitting by myself in my 10 minutes between class thinking, what could I do now? I probably wouldn't get anything done. But, like, having it right there in front of you, I was like, oh, yeah, I could write this email in the next 5 minutes. It's useful. And especially for someone like me who just kind of is constantly, like, I don't know, keeping their head above water barely.
So it's always about, like, finding the little times to always do something.
Yeah, and like obviously I'm not always doing something. I'm not a superhuman. I watch Netflix like most other people, presumably. But yeah, it's definitely like in those bursts of productivity and in the little times, like the amount of emails that you have to write, think about all that time. It just needs to be spent and figuring out where to spend it. That's, yeah.
Okay, I see. Then we're actually going to move towards the topic of grades, if you feel comfortable answering that. Since you didn't take any standardized testings, we will not ask any of that. But what is your average grade for 2 years at Mary and also before at Sacred Heart?
Okay, I'll tell you that I have had good marks like throughout Marianopolis and high school. I don't think I'll give you like a number, but for schools like Harvard, I don't think people get in based on grades. Like, if you, let's say, have a 97 average and your friend has, like, a 94, I don't think you can tell yourself, I'm going to get in over my friend because I have, like, an average that's 3% better. Like, there's definitely a cutoff-ish. Like, I think you have to do well. But they also know that CJEP is harder than, like, Ontario high schools, than U.S. high schools. Like, they add marks to our averages, knowing that it's more difficult and that we're taking different classes. So definitely grades are important, but they're not what's going to get you in. Like basically, you need to prove that you're academically capable. But beyond that, I really think because they're getting so many applicants, they're getting applications from so many people who have averages in the like mid-90s. that I think you have to stand out in other ways. And you can't, I think it might be a waste of time to try to improve your average by like 2% at the expense of doing other cool things that might make you stand out more. So I will say that yes, grades are very important, but they are not the be-all, end-all.
Then I'll leave it to Ian to talk about your Common App essay and perhaps also Harvard supplemental essay.
Sure. Before I jump into that, I just wanted to ask, because they announced that they were like, it was test optional pretty late. Were you thinking of taking those tests before, or did you like not even think about applying?
Taking the SAT did not cross. Okay, so I thought maybe I'll apply to Harvard before they went test option, but I wasn't actually thinking about Harvard. I was just thinking I could apply to US schools. Like maybe that's something I could do. So I started doing like Khan Academy has a kind of free SAT prep tool that I was following and like doing all those things every day. But I was taking SAT practice tests and thinking to myself, like, I'm not going to get a 1600. Like, this is, I would have to take it a few times, and even then, like, there's no guarantee that I would do exceptionally well on the SAT math section specifically, because the last time I did math was Sec 5. And so, yeah, I think standardized tests, I was thinking of potentially taking it, but thinking to myself, the fact that I have to take it might make my chances less good at it. So when they made it test optional, it definitely like increased my motivation.
Okay, perfect. So I'll jump into the topic of the Common App essay and I think school optionals. So how did you come up with the topic for your Common App essay?
Okay, so when I wrote my Common App personal essay, I was writing it. Actually, I wrote it the day that I had to submit the midnight. So I was under a time crunch and was thinking, I just gotta write. I'm just gonna write something. And so I started writing and I thought to myself, what character traits do I want to kind of portray? And I decided that it would be cool if I structured an essay. I wrote my like little introductory paragraph and thought it would be cool if I structured an essay in 3 parts with 3 different experiences that illustrated the same character trait. So I talked about basically resilience, kind of like that what I talked about before, like starting out not being great and then improving. And I think that's also potentially determination and discipline. I'm not sure exactly what they saw in that, but yeah, I structured my essay that way. I just wrote those 3 body paragraphs of those 3 experiences and then did kind of like a cute little conclusion where I tied them together and like made it go full circle. Yeah, and I think I wrote that probably in like 2 hours. It wasn't that long. Yeah, but if you have like honestly, getting the idea is the hardest part, and I really only get my ideas when I am under pressure. So if you get your idea, it's not going to be that long to write the essay. And I honestly, I didn't even really edit it that much. I think I was lucky in that I found something that worked and wrote it, but I could have easily been in the position of just having like writer's block and not thinking anything.
And, okay, so you said that you started writing it on the day or the before, right? So did you have any, like, did you ask anybody to proofread it, or you just submitted it after you were done?
I did, actually. Once I finished it, I got my mom to proofread it, who immediately said, "What? You're just writing it now." And so, yeah, she helped me. She liked the essay. She made a couple changes, and yeah, and then I submitted it. But honestly, it was so close at that point. It was night that I gave her like 10 minutes to read it just to make sure that I was like, that it was good what I was saying. And she kind of gave me the thumbs up, and then I sent it.
And so I'll move on to the school-specific questions. So I know you didn't apply to other U.S. schools, but maybe I'll just ask the question so that maybe you have an answer to it. So many selective U.S. schools have their school-specific questions, which are very similar from one to another. But I know you didn't apply, but how would you like make sure that every essay, although they are very similar, are different from each other and fits the right school? Do you have any tips or?
Yeah, I think it's the use of examples. Like whenever they ask you a question, like answering very specifically in terms of actual concrete things that you've done. Like rather than saying, "Oh, I think I'm a person who's hardworking and optimistic," like showing that through like examples that you can give, and hopefully you might have multiple examples of different character traits that you have, and sort of using each essay to talk about a different example, but through the spin of a specific book. So I know that's what I did for like all my essays for Harvard. I chose like 6 of the most important things that I thought I had done, and kind of used them to answer the question with like kind of concrete support, I guess.
Yeah, then let's jump into recommendation letters. I think students are also interested in that. So, how did you go about the process of like finding the teachers first to thinking about asking them for recommendation letters, and how did you choose those teachers in particular?
Yeah, so I'm actually in liberal arts. We're a very small program, so I think there are like 9 of us graduating this year. It's very small. Which worked really to my advantage, because it means that like the professors whose classes that I'm taking, there's basically the liberal arts department. I know all of those teachers very well because I've been in their classes in such small groups and had them basically every semester. So I think I had good relationships with a lot of my teachers and was like talking to them outside of classes. With a couple of my teachers, we would send like book recommendations and stuff back and forth. We got close because liberal arts is such a small program, and I'm sure they had relationships like that with the other people in liberal arts too. And I don't know if that's the case in like a larger program like in the sciences. I'm sure that's much more difficult to kind of cultivate. But I really love my professors, and so two of them who I had had many semesters and had good relationships with, and I asked them to write my letters of recommendation, and they were happy to do it, and I felt like they knew me really well. So I think that was definitely a pro. But at the same time, obviously, there are people applying from large U.S. high schools where their teachers might not know them. So if your teacher can say good things about you academically, or if there's a teacher who you've had conversations with outside of class, I think that's something really valuable, because they can kind of speak to who you are as a person. Like, Harvard really cares about whether you're going to make a good roommate and whether you're going to be like a good addition to the campus, and not, I mean, hard to say this, but like, I think it's important to like be interested in other humans to a certain extent as well, like kind of want good things for your fellow people rather than and I think if you have teachers who can maybe speak to that, it's something that's good and something that's easier to promote out in a smaller program.
Okay, then I hope students after hearing this, they won't go just changing programs to liberal arts, making it a very large program.
I mean, I'm sure you can do it. Like, people get in from sciences. I know Guillaume got in from sciences. You can do it. I just think that I had an easier time, potentially.
Yeah. Well, actually, still about recommendation letters. Did you give the teachers free rein to write your recommendation letters, or did you talk to them saying, those are some of the things I want you to show in your recommendation letter? Could you please write it sort of according to like this format? Did you do any of that, or did you just say, I want a recommendation letter, did you write one?
So for my recommendation letters, they had total free rein to say they wanted in whatever format. But I sent them the email where I would ask them for the recommendation letter. I sent them pictures of the fashion show that I had done. I sent them all of my my CV so that they knew the kind of things I was involved in. I sent them, I think I might have sent them my transcript so that they knew what grade I was getting for their classes as well. And then I sent them essays that I had written for things before, so that they kind of got an idea of my writing outside of their class, because I think that was sort of the angle that I was trying to take with someone who's into writing. And I'm pretty sure that's all that I sent them. For Oxford, I also sent them my personal statement, so I wrote that further in the notes. Yeah, so I think if you are the kind of person who like makes good decisions and writes their common app essays ahead of time, you might want to send those. But I was lucky because I was able to send basically my personal statements from like other applications and stuff in lieu of my inheritance.
Okay, then we know like selective schools especially, they sometimes ask for extra recommendation letters. For example, I think Robert probably asked for that. So did you get any extra recommendation letters, and if so, who did you get them from?
Yes, I did. I got a recommendation letter from Katalina Toth, who is a faculty advisor for Model UN, since I was president of Model UN, and she knew me really well in like the kind of extracurricular outside of academics area. She was able to write a recommendation letter, and I'm not sure. You know what? I really don't remember, but it's possible that Fitting Law also submitted kind of a brief recommendation letter along with it. and ask for recommendations. But yeah, those would have been the flow that I got.
Okay, then this sounds sort of cynical, like just to get a good recommendation letters from the teachers, but do you have any tips on relationship with teachers?
Tips on relationships with teachers. I kind of had good relationships with my professors from like the beginning, just because I was really interested in their courses, like genuinely. And it was definitely not like, oh, I'm gonna make friends with this person so they'll write me a good letter. Like, I think that's such a sad way to go about it. And honestly, it's probably transparent. Like, if you're not actually interested in someone's class, in their material, and are like trying to make friends with them, I think it's probably a show. Or unless you're a really great actor. But being in classes that genuinely interest you, and like specifically for me, like going into liberal arts, loving writing, history, philosophy, and wanting to have those conversations and being able to talk about books that I was reading, like that would have been exhausting if I wasn't actually interested. Like, it may be doable, but probably not worth it. So I definitely recommend like teachers who you're just genuinely going to be able to have a relationship with because you're interested in the same things. It's going to be a lot more doable and more fun, I think, than trying to like manufacture some kind of conversation.
Yeah. No. Okay. Then I'll actually give it to Yana to talk about your perhaps any portfolios you submitted for your application.
Before I jump into that, because for our first years, we never got full hand like college experience in person. So a lot of people think that it's very difficult to reach out to teachers when it's online, when we're on Zoom, and we don't really have those 5 minutes before, after class to, go have a little conversation with our professors. So do you have any tips on how to go about that? Because we just spent 1 year without really building a deep relationship with anyone, even with our class.
Yeah, that was hard. So I had like until March of my first year at the college, by which point I already had relationships with my teachers. So it was a lot more, it's easier to maintain a relationship over Zoom than to start one, definitely. Oh God. In terms of tips, I would say if you're reading a book that you think is cool and relates to the material in someone's class, that's awesome. Like, you can always write a teacher an email with like, hey, I'm reading this book and I thought that this was really interesting. And like, they're probably going to be happy to talk to you about it. And it's also just so much fun. And I know like with one of my professors, my philosophy professor, like we went to a Zoom talk because we were both interested in a certain topic. And yeah, I think I don't actually know how this works in math and science, like if this is applicable in any way, but if you're interested in specific components of what your teacher is saying or kind of things that relate to the class material and you're able to email them about that, it's just a great conversation starter. Yeah, I would recommend doing that, but also just being human and like not kind of hunting for relationships with your teachers. And just like seeing them as other people who might be interesting. Yeah.
I totally agree on that. So I'll move on to the portfolios. So you said you submitted the pictures from the fashion show, but did Harvard require anything like a graded paper or like a research abstract or anything else?
They didn't require anything. Oxford required a graded paper, which I submitted. But Harvard, I submitted pictures of the fashion show, as well as the paper that I was first author on. And what else did I submit? Oh, and I had presented at a conference called Learning in the Brain in San Francisco about a study that I had run in high school about the effects of moving meditation on attention in adolescents. I should have mentioned that earlier. That was another research that I did. But yeah, so I submitted a picture of that as like proof that I had gone, as well as like the pamphlet from the conference that had my abstract in it. So yeah, proof of research so that they could also see that like the paper that I published was kind of like a professional paper. And yeah, the pictures of the dresses, because if you're doing any kind of art, anything that's kind of quirky, I think it's cool to upload pictures, like so that they can be like, oh wow, cool, because they read so many applications that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And actually, this is another thing that I wanted to say, because I've been talking to some people who are also in the admitted Harvard class. And one of them, like they're obviously like academically good students. They're very cool people, but they also like everyone has a quirk. Like one girl, she breeds fish in her spare time. Another one builds motorcycles. Like I think like the unifying factor, I think, of the people who got in is just that everyone has a thing that you wouldn't expect. Like you wouldn't be able to Google how to get into Harvard and see like, oh, breed fish. Like everyone has this kind of quirky thing that I think shows off really well in pictures and in like extra things that you can upload. Which I didn't even know before getting in, but I guess maybe it keeps what people are applying now.
Then actually, can you talk a bit about your quirk?
Yeah, I think my quirk is a little bit less quirky than breeding fish, but I think designing and sewing sustainable fashion is probably my quirk. For the fashion show itself, originally every year the fashion show was just like buying clothes, and I didn't want to do that, and so I bought sewing for dummies and taught myself how to sew from that book. And then just went to thrift stores, and they have like huge amounts of just like sheets, tablecloths, curtains at Addendum, and that like no one buys because they're terrible as curtains. But like you can kind of cut them up and sew them into like a reasonable ball gown that actually looks pretty cool. So I made like kind of steampunk, kind of old-fashioned, but also like modern kind of ball gown designs. I made a hoop skirt, which was, for someone who doesn't have a really good visual mind, it was a challenge. But it was also really fun, and like the process of building a hoop skirt and like buying flowers and cloth and kind of sewing things together, it was, I think, pretty quirky. So I'd say that was probably my quirk.
Okay, definitely. And I don't recommend people just do weird things for the sake of getting into schools, but
but I mean, if you're the kind of person who has like a weird thing that you like to do, like continue to do that because it could help you get in.
And talking about weird things and sort of leading to somewhere, did you indicate any awards in the coming up? And if you're comfortable, could you give us an example?
Yes. First of all, I got a Scholastic Writing Portfolio Award. I tied for third in the international region, and I was in first in Canada. So I think that was probably the biggest award. But other than that, I had gotten like the graduation awards I got in high school. I wrote those down. Is there anything else? Yes. Yeah. Okay. So for the essay that I wrote for Addendum, before I turned it into a paper, I got an award, like the best essay award from that, which I wrote in the Common App. And I had also gotten an award for a history essay that I wrote. And then in like Sec 2 or 3, I came third in Quebec in a math competition that we had to do. So I think those were the awards that I indicated, I think.
Then I guess we'd have to disagree that you're not good at math, since you can.
The only reason I did well on that math thing is because I decided that I wanted to do well, so I really studied, and I don't think anyone else did.
Okay.
But I'm not just inherent.
Then actually some extra questions Vienna just thought up of her mind, which is also very interesting and very specific. It's interviews. So how did you go about the process of doing interview with Harvard and with Oxford?
Yeah, so my Harvard interview, best interview experience of my life. It was amazing. It was supposed to last 20 minutes. It ended up lasting 40. We just talked. It was great. To prepare for that interview, I basically just looked up, there are articles you can find really easily of what Harvard admissions officers, interviewers ask. So I looked those up. And some of it is what are books that you're reading, your favorite book? What are your extracurriculars do you do? Can you talk about a time that you challenge, or what your favorite class is, all these kind of basic questions about who you are. And I prepared a little bit, and I jotted down some classes that I had looked through the Harvard course catalog, and these specific classes mesh really well with my interests, and just in terms of being able to say this is why I want to go to Harvard. But other than that, I think really I genuinely clicked with the interviewer, and she actually she was a MariMun graduate who maybe 15 years ago was president of MariMun. So we were basically the same person 15 years later, which was really cool. And they actually do that often. If there's someone similar to you, they match you to an interviewer who has had basically a similar life experience. Yeah, and so we talked a lot about that. We talked about books. We talked about just political issues, things like that. And it was just really fun. It felt like a conversation, and she was super nice, which was not like the Oxford interview. I think the UK model is to kind of try to scare you. So in the US, they very much want you to feel like, oh, you're welcome and like we're friendly here. And in the UK, they want you to be like, oh, you're not good enough for us. So there's like two very different ways of going about it. And I think the UK one of trying to like grill you on your subject specifically definitely gets to the people who are like really pointy. Like they know everything about this one specific area and are kind of obsessive. And that's like really good for excelling in your domain. And so their interviews are very much like if you've studied, and not even studying, I think, because I don't think you can study enough in the lead up to your interview to know everything about that subject. But if you're just the kind of person who is naturally obsessive enough to be able to answer our like questions about the topic well, then the UK is a really good option because you can't take any classes outside of your domain. Like all of your classes are tutorials that are one-on-one with the professor in your specific subject area. So it's super intense academically, which is really good, except that I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And so I think that potentially showed because when I was answering, I was giving answers that kind of tied in like government, politics, talked about our history, but also like I think it was clear that I maybe wasn't as kind of focused in one area as they maybe would have liked me. So I think it's just two very different styles of interviewing and two different kinds of people that they're looking for. Yeah. So it depends on the person. But obviously going to school US, UK, you're going to get great education either way. Staying in Canada obviously as well. But it's just different things that they value.
Okay. Then I will leave it to you to just ask some general final questions.
Yeah. So do you have any final general tips for students that are thinking of applying outside of Canada?
Yeah. I think that my general tips would be don't do it because you think it's going to be like massive or something like that. Like if you're going to go to school outside of Canada, I think there has to be a driving factor. Like you think that you would genuinely benefit from some of the courses or the professors or the school environment. Yeah, I would say take the decision very seriously because it's a big investment and you have to consider whether the payoff is worth it. But other than that, definitely talk to people who are going to the school, who are currently there. It's really helpful to get a sense of what they like and don't like because how people feel about different elements of the school experience. Like there are some people who like absolutely love the kind of frat sorority vibe, and I know that that's not personally me, but if you can kind of talk to someone and get a sense of what they value about the school spirit and decide whether you mesh with that as well, I think that's really useful. So I would say consider the decision really seriously, whether it's going to be worth it for you, and also talk to people who are currently there. And I mean, if anyone wants to talk to me, I'm obviously not there yet, but you can always talk to me on Facebook. I mean, I'm happy to offer whatever advice I can.
Oh, perfect. Then I guess we'll drop your Facebook profile link in the description of this episode, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Perfect. Then I guess, so our final question is actually regarding, so you talked about making a decision of whether staying in the States, going outside Canada for that. So after you're admitted to Harvard, how did you go about the process of making the decision that I think I'm going to outside of Canada instead of staying in Canada or in such a way?
So, I basically, I don't know if anyone knows this trick, but I made a pros and cons list. I don't know that everyone knows that trick, but made a pros and cons list and then flipped a coin. And because I didn't know how I felt, like I didn't know where I wanted to go. And so the outcome was Harvard and I was excited, which made me realize that that's what I wanted to do because I had kind of, in terms of the actual stuff on paper, like writing down what are the advantages maybe for both, what are the opportunities, what are the professors, what are the courses, I had written down everything that's like concrete and could not come to a decision. So at that point, I think I basically had to decide how my gut felt because my brain was so much like, but it costs so much more. And so, yeah, I don't know. I made the decision based on the information that I had gotten and based on kind of concrete sort of courses and professors that I really wanted to meet and learn from. But my brain wasn't able to catch up to that information. Like I really had to go at it based off of how I felt. Yeah, and at the same time, also, I know that, like, getting into Harvard is so unfair. Like, I am sure that at least 10% of the applicants are equally qualified. And so the fact that they admitted, like, 3% of people, I'm sure that they could make like 3 to 4 like incoming classes that would do just as well. And so the fact that they chose me to be one of the people that they admitted, I felt so lucky because like I know that it wasn't because of like what the stuff that I did, because I could just as easily not gotten in, that I really wanted to take advantage of that opportunity that I felt like life had given me. Yeah.
Okay, well then, I guess using a point to deciding is so bad if you really don't know where you want to go is sort of a nice way to decide. And it's even better when you know that you got the right decision after it.
Well, that's the thing, but if I had flipped the coin and then felt disappointed by the outcome, I would know that I had to stay here instead. Like, it was basically just to figure out how I felt.
Perfect. Then
yeah.
I guess I will do that too for my university position. Other than that, thank you so much, Katalina, for coming onto the show, and thank you, Anna, for hosting this episode with me. Yeah, and I will close it off here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone who tuned in to listen. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we did during the interview.
If you liked this episode, learned something, or just want to help out a bunch of students, please leave a review, write a comment, and share this on social media. If you are listening to this on YouTube, please subscribe and write to us in the comments.
All the books and other resources recommended by the interviewee are in the podcast description/video description depending on your platform, and depending on when you see this, you might be able to use our affiliate link to purchase them.
The Marianopolis Addendum podcast is actively seeking local sponsors here in Montreal, so if you are interested, please contact us at the email linked in the description. All the profit generated by this podcast will go back to fund our club's activity. If we have any surplus, they will be donated at the end of every month to a local charity.
This episode was edited by Camilla Huang.
And the artwork is done by Camilla Huang.
The producers and guests associated with this episode may express their opinion, but this podcast does not support any political parties. We only aim to bring different perspectives on different issues through the free exchange of opinions and ideas.
We look forward to seeing you at our next broadcast. Cheers!